The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel louder. The streetlights hummed, and the empty swings in the playground moved slowly in the evening breeze. Officer Daniel sat in his patrol car, staring at the empty park. He had driven past it 100 times, but something tonight felt different. He couldn't explain why, but he decided to stop. Daniel stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The park looked lonely, forgotten. As he walked closer, he noticed something unusual near the sandpit. At first, he thought it was a pile of clothes left behind. But then, the small figure moved. His heart skipped a beat. It was not clothes. It was a child. A little girl lay curled up on the cold sand, fast asleep. Her tiny arms hugged herself, and her clothes were dusty. Daniel froze for a moment. 100 questions rushed into his mind. Why was she here? Where were her parents? Why would a child be sleeping in a playground at night? He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. The girl looked no older than 6 or 7. Her face was innocent, but tired, as if sleep had taken her after a long struggle. Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. He was a police officer, trained for danger and crime. But this felt like something else. Something deeper. The city lights reflected in his eyes as he looked around. The playground was empty. No adults, no family, no one calling for her. Just silence. He whispered softly, "Hey, sweetheart." But she didn't wake. Her breathing was slow, steady. She must have been exhausted. Daniel sat back for a moment, putting his hands on his head. He had seen many things in his years on the force robberies, accidents, fights, but nothing had broken him the way this did. The sight of a child, alone and vulnerable, cut through his heart. It wasn't just the danger she was in. It was the question he couldn't shake. Why was she here in the first place? His radio crackled, pulling him back. He thought about calling it in, but something stopped him. This wasn't just about procedure. This was about humanity. He needed to understand. First, he needed to know her story. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. Daniel looked at the girl again. She had no blanket, no bag, nothing that showed she belonged here. It was as if the playground had become her home. The thought chilled him. Slowly, he stood up and scanned the area. The benches, the swings, the slide all empty. The city noise was far away, muffled. It was just him, the child, and the endless night. He felt small in that moment, powerless against the weight of the unknown. What had led her here? What had pushed her to sleep in the sand when she should have been safe in bed? As he crouched down again, Daniel saw something else. A small tear mark on her cheek, dried by the night air. She had been crying before sleep claimed her. That broke him even more. He placed his hand near her, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. He whispered, more to himself than to her, "What happened to you, little one?" The girl stirred slightly, her hand moving across the sand as if searching for something. But she didn't wake. Daniel sighed, his breath heavy. He couldn't imagine the pain, the loneliness that had brought her here. And yet, here she was, lying in the open, trusting the world not to harm her. It was in that moment Daniel realized this wasn't just another night on duty. This was the start of something bigger, something that would test him in ways he had never known. He didn't know the details yet, but deep inside, he felt it. There was a truth waiting to be uncovered, and it was hidden behind the peaceful face of this sleeping child. Daniel stayed beside her, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to protect her, to shield her from the cruel world that had already shown her too much. The night felt heavier, the silence sharper, as if the whole city held its breath. The little girl shifted again, whispering something in her sleep. Daniel leaned closer, straining to hear. Her words were faint, broken, but one thing was clear. She was calling for someone, a name, a plea. Then silence. Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't know who she was calling for, but he knew one thing for certain: he would find out. Whatever her story was, whatever truth was hiding in the shadows, he couldn't walk away. Not now, not ever. The playground lights flickered as if the universe itself wanted to mark this moment. A war had begun, not a war with guns or violence, but a war for truth, for justice, and for the soul of a child who had already suffered too much. And Daniel, the cop who once thought he had seen it all, was about to learn that some battles are fought not with weapons, but with heart. The little girl stirred in her sleep, her body shifting on the cold sand. Daniel watched carefully, unsure if he should wake her. She looked so fragile, so small against the vast emptiness of the playground. For a moment, he hesitated, but then his training pushed him forward. He reached out gently and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he whispered softly, "you're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open, slow and tired. She blinked at the strange figure in front of her, a tall man in a dark blue uniform. For a second, fear crossed her face. She pulled back slightly, her small body curling tighter. "It's okay," Daniel said quickly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm a police officer. I won't hurt you." The girl said nothing. She only stared at him with wide dark eyes that seemed older than her years. Daniel's heart sank. Those were not the eyes of a child who had been cared for and protected. Those were the eyes of someone who had seen too much. "What's your name?" Daniel asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered so softly he almost missed it. "Maya." "Maya," Daniel repeated, as if saying it would give him some connection to her. "That's a beautiful name." Maya's lips trembled, but she said nothing more. She looked down at the ground, her fingers tracing lines in the sand. Daniel wanted to ask her 100 questions. Why was she here? Where were her parents? Was she hurt? But something told him not to push too fast. She was scared, and trust would take time. He took off his jacket and placed it around her small shoulders. The jacket nearly swallowed her, but at least it gave her some warmth. Maya clutched it tightly, as if holding on to the only safety she had. "Are you hungry?" Daniel asked softly. She gave a tiny nod. Daniel sighed. His chest felt heavy. This was no accident. A child did not end up sleeping in a playground unless something was very wrong. He knew the city had many dark corners, poverty, neglect, broken families. But to see it so close, in the face of a little girl named Maya, broke something inside him. He pulled out his radio. But before he could call it in, Maya's small hand reached out and grabbed his arm. Her eyes widened with fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Don't take me away." Daniel froze. The words cut into him. He had expected fear, maybe confusion, but this was something deeper. She was begging, as if being taken away was worse than sleeping on the ground. "Why not?" he asked softly. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't answer. She only shook her head, clutching the jacket tighter. Daniel didn't push. He couldn't. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Okay, I won't take you anywhere you don't want to go. But you need to trust me, Maya. You're not safe out here. I want to help you." For the first time, Maya looked at him not with fear, but with something else, something small, fragile, like the flicker of a candle in the dark. Hope. The night stretched on, and the sounds of the city grew quieter. Daniel stayed by her side, keeping watch like a guardian. He didn't know what her story was, but he knew one thing for certain. The truth was hiding inside her silence, and when it came out, it would change everything. Maya finally leaned against him, her tiny head resting on his arm. Daniel sat still, hardly daring to breathe. The girl who had been alone in the dark was now trusting him, if only for a moment. And in that moment, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would uncover the truth. Because no child should ever have to sleep in the sand. Asterisk. The night grew colder as the hours passed. Daniel kept his jacket wrapped around Maya, watching her small figure as she leaned against him. She had stopped trembling, but her silence weighed heavily in the air. He could feel the fear inside her, like a shadow that refused to leave. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice soft and careful. "Maya, why were you sleeping here? Where's your home?" The little girl's face tightened. She looked away, her eyes fixed on the empty swings swaying in the breeze. For a moment, Daniel thought she wouldn't answer. But then, in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she whispered, "I don't have one." The words struck Daniel like a blow. He had prepared himself for many answers, but not this. He stared at her, unable to hide the pain in his eyes. "No home?" he repeated softly. Maya shook her head. Her small fingers dug into the jacket fabric, holding it as if it were her only shield. Daniel's heart ached. He had dealt with homelessness before, but to see it in a child, it was something else. Something that broke the human spirit. "Where are your parents?" he asked carefully, not wanting to scare her further. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. She hugged herself and whispered, "Gone." Daniel's throat tightened. Gone. The word was sharp, final, but unclear. Did she mean they had abandoned her? Did she mean something worse? He wanted to ask, but the look in her eyes stopped him. That look carried more pain than any child should ever know. He took a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "Maya, I promise you, whatever happened, you're not alone now. I'm here." Her eyes flicked toward him, studying his face. It was as if she was searching for lies, testing whether his words could be trusted. For the first time she gave a small nod, but her expression stayed guarded. Daniel looked around the park again. It was clear she had been here for more than one night. The sand clung to her clothes, her hair was unwashed, and her shoes were worn thin. How long had she been surviving like this, and how had no one noticed until now? The thought filled him with anger. Not at her, but at the world. At the people who had walked past this playground every day, blind to the child hiding in plain sight. As he sat there, lost in thought, Maya's voice broke the silence. They said they would come back, but they never did. Daniel turned to her sharply. "Who said that?" Her eyes welled up with tears, and she buried her face into the jacket. She refused to answer. But those words gave Daniel the first real clue. Someone had left her here, promising to return. And they never had. His mind raced. Was it her parents? Strangers? Was she abandoned? Kidnapped? The question spiraled in his head. He knew one thing for certain. This was no accident. There was a reason this child was here, alone, and it was tied to a truth darker than he wanted to imagine. Daniel's radio crackled again, breaking the moment. A voice called for him, routine check-ins. His hand hovered over the device, but he didn't answer. Not yet. He couldn't risk losing the fragile trust he had just built. Instead, he whispered to Maya, "Don't worry. I'll find out what happened, and I'll make sure no one ever leaves you alone again." For the first time, a single tear slid down her cheek, not from fear, but from the weight of someone's promise. She looked up at him, her voice trembling but steady enough to ask the question that had been buried in her heart. "Do you really mean that?" Daniel's chest tightened. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Yes, Maya, I mean it." The playground lights flickered again, and the night seemed heavier. Daniel knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew this was the beginning of a journey that would reveal not only Maya's hidden truth, but also test everything he believed about duty, justice, and humanity. Because sometimes the greatest battles were not fought on the streets with criminals, but inside the soul, where promises and truth could change a life forever. The first rays of dawn broke across the sky, painting the playground in pale gold. Daniel had not moved all night. He sat with Maya leaning against him, his jacket wrapped tightly around her small body. She had drifted back to sleep, her breathing soft and steady. As the sun rose, Daniel knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. He had to act. The promise he made to Maya weighed on him, but so did his duty as a police officer. He needed answers. He pulled out his radio again and hesitated. If he called this in, others would come. Social services, detectives, reporters, people who might see Maya as a case number, not a child. Daniel clenched his jaw. He wouldn't let her disappear into a system that might fail her again. Not until he understood the truth. When Maya stirred. Awake, he crouched down beside her. "Morning, kiddo," he said softly. She rubbed her eyes and looked around, confused, as if she expected the night to swallow her again. Daniel offered her a small smile. "How about some breakfast?" The word made her eyes light up, just for a second. He took her to a nearby diner, one that opened early for the working crowd. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. Maya sat at the corner booth, so small that her legs dangled without touching the floor. When the waitress came, Daniel ordered eggs and toast for himself, and pancakes with syrup for Maya. She stared at the plate when it arrived, as if she hadn't seen food in days. Then slowly she began to eat. Daniel watched silently, his heart heavy. No child should ever eat with that kind of hunger. After a few minutes, he asked gently, "Maya, can you tell me who left you in the playground?" Her fork froze in midair. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "They said they'd come back, but they didn't." Daniel leaned forward. "Who are they, your parents?" She shook her head quickly, almost violently, as if the word itself hurt. Her lips trembled, but she refused to say more. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. Pushing too hard could break her trust. But inside, his mind was already piecing together possibilities, abandonment, trafficking, or something worse. After breakfast, he drove Maya to the precinct. Not to expose her, but to gather resources quietly. He tucked her into his office, giving her paper and pencils to draw while he searched the missing children database. One by one, faces appeared on the screen. Children who had been reported lost, abandoned, or stolen. Daniel scanned them carefully, his eyes sharp. Then he froze. A picture on the screen looked almost exactly like Maya, same dark eyes, same braided hair. The file said her name was Amaya Johnson, age 7. Reported missing 3 months ago. Her mother had filed the report, but there had been no lead since then. Daniel's pulse quickened. He looked at Maya, who was drawing quietly, unaware of the storm gathering around her. If this file was correct, then she wasn't just a lost girl in a playground. She was a missing child. He printed the file and slipped it into his folder, but he didn't tell Maya yet. He needed confirmation. He needed the whole story before breaking her fragile trust. Just then, Maya spoke, breaking the silence. "Officer." "Daniel?" she asked softly. "Yes, Maya?" She held up the drawing she had made. It showed a small house, drawn in shaky lines. Next to it were 2 stick figures holding hands. But off to the side, another figure stood alone, tall and dark, with no face. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "What's this?" he asked carefully. Maya looked down at the paper, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's who took me away." Daniel's stomach dropped. The faceless figure in her drawing wasn't just a child's imagination. It was her memory. And it meant that someone out there had stolen this little girl's life and was still free. Daniel clenched his fists. The war he had felt beginning in the playground was real, and it had just escalated. Daniel couldn't shake the image of Maya's drawing. The faceless figure haunted him more than any crime scene ever had. He kept glancing at her as she sat quietly in his office, humming softly while coloring another page. To anyone else, she was just a little girl trying to pass the time. But Daniel knew better. Behind her silence lay answers to questions no one had dared to ask. He slipped the missing child report into his bag. The name on the paper, Amaya Johnson, echoed in his head. If Maya truly was Amaya, then someone had taken her months ago. But why was she in the playground? Why was she alone now? The precinct buzzed outside his door. Phones rang, officers moved. In and out, papers shuffled, but inside his office, the air was heavy. He pulled out his phone and quietly called the number listed on the report. "Hello?" A weary voice answered. "Mrs. Johnson?" Daniel asked. "This is Officer Daniel Hayes. I'm calling about your daughter." The line went silent for a heartbeat, then the woman's voice cracked. "Amaya? Did you find her? Please, tell me." "You found her." Daniel's throat tightened. He glanced at Maya, who was still coloring, unaware of the call. "I may have, but I need to confirm a few things first. Can you come down to the precinct?" Yes, right away," she cried. The line went dead. Daniel rubbed his face with his hand. This was moving fast, maybe too fast. He didn't know how Maya would react. She was fragile, terrified of being taken away. He needed to handle this carefully. Before he could think further, his partner, Officer Ramirez, walked in. "Hey, Hayes, what's with the kid? You running a daycare now?" Daniel shot him a look. "Not now, Ramirez." But Ramirez wasn't so easily pushed aside. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Word is, you picked up a girl last night. Alone, no ID, no family. What's the story?" Daniel hesitated. He trusted Ramirez, but this wasn't just a routine case. There was something bigger at play. Something that made his instincts scream, "Just let me handle this one," Daniel said firmly. Ramirez studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but careful, partner. If something's off, we both go down with it." As Ramirez left, Daniel looked back at Maya. She had drawn another picture. This one was darker scribbled shadows, tall walls, and a locked door. In the corner, a small figure crouched alone. Daniel knelt beside her. "Maya, is this where you were?" She nodded, not meeting his eyes. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They kept me there. In the dark, until I ran away." Daniel's chest tightened. This was no simple case of a missing child. Maya had been held somewhere by someone. And that someone was still out there. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. "Hayes, there's a woman here asking for you. Says it's about her daughter." Daniel stood quickly. Maya looked up, fear flashing in her eyes. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel crouched again, his hands on her shoulders. "It might be your mom, Maya, the one who's been looking for you." But instead of relief, Maya's face went pale. She shook her head violently. "No, don't let them take me. Please." Daniel froze. The fear in her eyes was raw, real. He realized in that moment that nothing about this case was simple. If this was her mother, why was Maya so terrified? If it wasn't, then who was waiting outside? His pulse quickened. The war for truth had reached its breaking point, and Daniel knew the next few minutes would decide everything. Daniel's heart pounded as he walked toward the front desk. A woman stood there, clutching a worn photograph. Her eyes were swollen from sleepless nights, but when she saw him, she rushed forward. "Officer Hayes? I'm her mother. I'm Amaya's mother." She shoved the photograph into his hands. Daniel looked down. It was Maya, same braids, same eyes, but smiling, alive. In a way he hadn't yet seen her. Behind him, Maya's voice trembled. "No." Daniel turned. She had followed him, her small frame shaking. She stared at the woman, fear in her eyes instead of recognition. The woman dropped to her knees, tears spilling. "Amaya, baby, it's me, Mommy. I've been searching for you every single day." But Maya stepped back, clutching Daniel's jacket tighter. Her lips quivered. "You left me. You promised you'd come back. You never did." The words sliced through the air. The woman gasped, her face pale. No, Amaya, listen to me. I didn't leave you. They took you from me. I begged them to give you back. I never stopped looking. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked between the two, the mother pleading, the child trembling. The truth was tangled in pain and memory. He knelt beside Maya. Maya. Sometimes when we're hurt, it feels like the people we love abandoned us. But sometimes, the truth is they were fighting for us the whole time. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She looked at the woman again, searching, unsure. Her mother reached into her purse and pulled out something small, a faded stuffed rabbit. Its ear torn, its fur worn thin. "You carried this everywhere," her mother whispered. "You wouldn't sleep without it." Mia's breath caught. Her small hands reached out slowly, touching the rabbit as if it were a dream. Memories flickered in her eyes, warmth, laughter, a home she thought she had lost forever. Daniel saw the change. The fear in her gaze softened, replaced by recognition. She whispered one word, trembling but filled with longing. "Mom?" Her mother broke down, pulling her into a desperate embrace. "Yes, baby, yes, it's me." Maya sobbed against her chest, clinging to her as if she would never let go again. The sound filled the room, raw and powerful. Daniel turned away, blinking back tears. He had seen pain before, but this reunion after so much loss was almost too much to bear. He stepped outside, leaning against the wall. His hands trembled, his throat tight. For years he had carried the weight of the world as a cop, but nothing had broken him like this moment. The war he had felt that night in the playground wasn't about criminals or laws. It was about a child's fight for love, for safety, for truth. And in the end, love had won. When Daniel walked back in, Maya looked up from her mother's arms. Her face was streaked with tears, but this time, they were not tears of fear. They were tears of release. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Daniel smiled, though his own eyes were wet. "You don't have to thank me, Maya. Just be happy. That's all I want." The room was quiet except for the sound of a child finally safe, a mother finally whole, and an officer who had discovered that the greatest battles were not fought with guns or badges, but with the heart, for the first time in years. Daniel allowed himself to cry. Not from sorrow, but from the weight of truth, and the beauty of seeing it set a little girl free.